Hey everybody, and welcome back. Today we are at large in Saltville, Virginia. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite figures in old-time Appalachian music, a multi-instrumentalist and songster by the name of Hobart Smith.
When it's one country right has to do. Well, it's one country right has to view.
Hobart Smith, or Hobe, was born in 1897 in Saltville, Virginia, to Alexander King Smith and Luvine Smith, and grew up in the Rich Valley and Henrytown sections of Saltville. The Smith family was very musical. Hobart said that both his grandfathers played fiddle, although he never got to hear either one of them play, as his maternal grandfather died of tuberculosis during the Civil War, and he didn't get a chance to hear his father's father play before his death. Growing up, he remembered his mother singing old ballads such as The Drowsy Sleeper and Two Brothers. He also recalled his parents leading the family in singing ballads such as Cripple Creek and John Henry, as well as ballads about romance that the children would call love songs, such as Barbary Allen. The Smith family was constantly acquiring songs from the surrounding community. In 1909, at the age of 14, Hobart's sister Texas began working at the Matheson Alkali Salt Works, the company that made the town of Saltville a company town, and she would bring new songs that she would hear at the salt works into the Smith household. She later recalled that, quote, "Every evening when I went home from work, I had a new song to sing." Hobart and his sister, Texas Gladden, another well-known Appalachian ballad singer, recalled later in life that their mother was also a beautiful singer. They remarked that she could, quote, "raise the hair on your head with anything that she was of the mind to sing." Hobart and his sister Texas asserted that they were so musically inclined because it was a tradition in their family that was handed down for generations. On the subject of old-time music, Hobart Smith said that, quote, "I grew up into it, but farming was my first life." Hobart Smith would farm in Saltville throughout his life, and in addition to music, he would supplement his income as a butcher, a painter, and a wagon driver for a time. As a boy, Hobart would watch his father play banjo and hope to one day emulate him. Hobart recalled picking up a fire shovel as a young boy and pantomiming banjo playing. Hobart's father bought him his first banjo from a Montgomery Ward mail order catalog and said that by age 7 he could play, quote, "pretty well." He later learned another banjo playing style that used the drop thumb technique, aka the double note technique. He learned it from a friend of his father's named John Greer, who said he learned it from African American musicians in the area. Hobart learned to play fiddle from an old African American family friend named Jim Spencer. According to Hobart, Jim Spencer was, quote, "raised up during slave times," and the first fiddle tune that Jim taught Hobart was a tune called "Jimmy Put the Kettle On." As a teenager, Hobart and his cousin would sneak into the segregated section of Saltville at night to hear the black musicians play. Around age 14, Hobart learned to play guitar and harmonica from local African American musicians. Hobart's music is representative of the close interactions and relationships between old-time musicians of differing races in the early 1900s, despite racist social norms and regulations of the time. In later interviews with music historian Alan Lomax, Texas Gladden Smith and Hobart recall hearing the blues for the first time from various musicians traveling through Saltville on the railroad, sometime prior to the 1920s, as far as they could remember. Hobart was also a skilled buck dancer, and would sometimes play guitar and flatfoot at the same time. Hobart recalled that, quote, "we'd have a square dance in the community twice a week. We'd have one on Wednesday night and Saturday night. All my kinfolk would meet and Daddy would pick the banjo, and we'd dance till 12 o'clock every night of the week." He said it was, quote, "like prayer meeting, and the family members would catch it from house to house," equating the Holy Spirit with music. Hobart also learned to play piano and organ in church, and he played piano at revivals all around the Saltville area. Hobart Smith spent his entire life living in Saltville, Virginia. In 1933, he and his sister Texas performed at the Whitetop Mountain Folk Festival, which was held in nearby Whitetop, Virginia, an area that's very rich with old-time Appalachian music history. The same year Hobart and Texas performed, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt attended the festival, which, needless to say, was a big deal. Eleanor Roosevelt loved old-time Appalachian music, which she first learned about from her father, who lived in Abingdon, Virginia in the early 1890s. The First Lady was so impressed with Hobart and Texas's performance that she invited them to perform at the White House for her husband, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, to which the siblings obliged. For 2 years, Hobart performed in minstrel shows in the Emory, Virginia and Abingdon, Virginia areas, and would also perform with Clarence Tom Ashley, a banjo player from Johnson County, Tennessee, and is very prolific in old-time Appalachian music history. In 1942, musicologist and folk historian Alan Lomax sought out Hobart in Texas to record their music for preservation in the Library of Congress, after hearing about their performance at Whitetop and later the White House. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, Alan Lomax would visit Hobart and the Smith family several times, not only recording music, but stories and family history as well, which were preserved in interviews that Lomax held with members of the Smith family. In one interview, Texas recalled that while growing up, it seemed to her that among mountain musicians in her area, quote, every fellow wanted to outdo the other, and that, quote, every fellow wanted to know one more song than the other guy. Maybe that explains the vastness of old Hobart's old-time song repertoire. In the 1950s and early 1960s, Hobart Smith made some recordings with Bessie Jones, an African-American gospel and folk singer from southern Georgia. These recordings were facilitated through Alan Lomax, and along with several other musicians, Hobart and Bessie Jones recorded songs such as It Just Suits Me with the Georgia Sea Island Singers.
The devil wears those hypocrite shoes and it just suits me. Devil wears those hypocrite shoes and it just suits me.
And Regular Rollin' Under with Ed Young, a fife player from Mississippi. Early 1960s, in the early days of the folk and blues revivals, Hobart Smith played many folk festivals, including the 1964 Newport Folk Festival, where he performed alongside other folk and blues legends such as Muddy Waters, Skip James, Almeda Riddle, Elizabeth Cotton, Doc Watson, Ralph Stanley, Mississippi John Hurt, and many, many more. In 2025, I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with a descendant of Hobart Smith's. His name was Nathan Smith, and he told me 2 stories about Hobart Smith, who he called Uncle Hobe, that have been passed through the family over the years. Mr. Smith said that Hobart was a hard man and wasn't much for nonsense. He especially wasn't fond of people messing with his kinfolk. One day, Hobart's son came home from school saying that his teacher called him stupid. Hobart was having none of that, so he loaded his son into the family machine and drove directly to the schoolhouse, where Hobart spotted the teacher approaching her own vehicle, about to go home for the day. Hobart confronted the teacher and asked if she did indeed call his son stupid. When she didn't deny the accusation, Hobart lit into the teacher, and from then on, the teacher had no cross words for the young Smith boy. Another family story imparted to me by Mr. Nathan Smith was that on another afternoon, another one of Hobart's sons came home from school saying that another boy, or group of boys, threatened to beat him up. When Hobart asked his son how he responded, the son replied, "Well, I came home, of course." Hobart didn't take kindly to this. He explained to his son that he was not to run away from a fight, and he loaded his son into the family machine so he could go confront his aggressors. Long story short, Hobart's son lost the fight. In 1965, on January 11th, Hobart McKinley Smith passed away due to a combination of heart disease and lobar pneumonia. Before his death, Hobart recorded with Alan Lomax several times, and later on with Fleming Brown, a musicologist from Missouri. However, many of these recordings weren't released until after Hobart's passing. Just before his death, the album Hobart Smith of Saltville, Virginia, was released by Folk Legacy Records. And in 2001, the album Hobart Smith Blue Ridge Legacy was released by Rounder Records. A few years later, in 2005, Smithsonian Folkways released an album called In Sacred Trust, the 1963 Fleming Brown tapes, which features recordings that Hobart Smith made with Fleming Brown later in his life. Hobart's music has influenced generations of musicians. Even the father of bluegrass, Bill Monroe, said that Hobart Smith was, quote, a good guitar bluesman, a great old-time fiddler, and the best old-time banjo picker I ever heard. And Bill Monroe didn't dole out compliments lightly. Just for kicks, here's a snippet of an interview that Hobart Smith did with Alan Lomax in 1959.
When did you learn to play the fiddle?
Oh, I learned to play the fiddle when I was about 17 years old. I first started on a banjo. My daddy ordered it for me. drummer or a little short neck banjo. I was about 7 years old when I played my first tune on the banjo. Then I played the banjo a long time, and I liked the guitar pretty well. I got into playing the guitar. Then I liked the fiddle. I got on the fiddle. Then I played on organ first. Played organ the first time, first going out, so I played organ in the next piano, one piece of nothing. But,
How many songs do you suppose you know?
Lord, I don't know how many. I expected I'd be safe and singing between 75 and 100.
Well, folks, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about one of my favorite old-time Appalachian artists, Hobart Smith. Information in this video comes from the Museum of the Middle Appalachians in Saltville, Virginia. Interviews with Hobart Smith and Texas Gladden on the Lomax Digital Archives website, and public records available on Ancestry.com. Thanks again for watching. I hope you learned something and had fun, and I'll see you next video.